دبي موئل الثقافات وحاضنة الإبداع، تحتضن بين أركانها مزيجا فريدا من الثقافات والتقاليد، حيث يلتقي التراث العريق مع الفكر الحديث. على مر العصور كانت دبي مركزا للحوار الحضاري وبيئة مثالية لتلاقي العقول والأفكار من مختلف أرجاء العالم، ساعية دوما لتعزيز ثقافة المعرفة والانفتاح. وهنا اليوم في قلب دبي حيث يبنى المستقبل، في هذا الصرح الثقافي مكتبة محمد بن راشد تلتقي نخبة من العقول من جميع أنحاء العالم في حدث يجمع بين أمجاد الماضي وتحديات الحاضر ورؤى المستقبل. أهلا بكم في أول نسخة من مؤتمر دبي الدولي للمكتبات، حيث تبدأ رحلة جديدة لإعادة تعريف دور المكتبات في العالم. أكثر من 60 خبيرا من 25 دولة يجتمعون ليطرحوا رؤى جديدة ستعيد تشكيل مفهوم المكتبات. استعدوا لاستكشاف التحول الرقمي في المكتبات عبر الذكاء الاصطناعي واكتشاف الكنوز الأيقونية والمجموعات النادرة. من خلال أكثر من 60 جلسة نلقي الضوء على مستقبل المكتبات وأهمية التراث والمعرفة للأجيال القادمة. إنه الحدث الذي سيخلد في تاريخ المكتبات، مؤتمر دبي الدولي للمكتبات 2024، حيث يجتمع الماضي والحاضر والمستقبل. دبي موئل الثقافات وحاضنة الإبداع، تحتضن بين أركانها مزيجا فريدا من الثقافات والتقاليد، حيث يلتقي التراث العريق مع الفكر الحديث. على مر العصور كانت دبي مركزا للحوار الحضاري وبيئة مثالية لتلاقي العقول والأفكار من مختلف أرجاء العالم، ساعية دوما لتعزيز ثقافة المعرفة والانفتاح. وهنا اليوم في قلب دبي حيث يبنى المستقبل، في هذا الصرح الثقافي مكتبة محمد بن راشد تلتقي نخبة من العقول من جميع أنحاء العالم في حدث يجمع بين أمجاد الماضي وتحديات الحاضر ورؤى المستقبل. أهلا بكم في أول نسخة من مؤتمر دبي الدولي للمكتبات، حيث تبدأ رحلة جديدة لإعادة تعريف دور المكتبات في العالم. أكثر من 60 خبيرا من 25 دولة يجتمعون ليطرحوا رؤى جديدة ستعيد تشكيل مفهوم المكتبات. استعدوا لاستكشاف التحول الرقمي في المكتبات عبر الذكاء الاصطناعي واكتشاف الكنوز الأيقونية والمجموعات النادرة. من خلال أكثر من 60 جلسة نلقي الضوء على مستقبل المكتبات وأهمية التراث والمعرفة للأجيال القادمة. إنه الحدث الذي سيخلد في تاريخ المكتبات، مؤتمر دبي الدولي للمكتبات 2024، حيث يجتمع الماضي والحاضر والمستقبل. دبي موئل الثقافات وحاضنة الإبداع، تحتضن بين أركانها مزيجا فريدا من الثقافات والتقاليد، حيث يلتقي التراث العريق مع الفكر الحديث. على مر العصور كانت دبي مركزا للحوار الحضاري وبيئة مثالية لتلاقي العقول والأفكار من مختلف أرجاء العالم، ساعية دوما لتعزيز ثقافة المعرفة والانفتاح. وهنا اليوم في قلب دبي حيث يبنى المستقبل، في هذا الصرح الثقافي مكتبة محمد بن راشد تلتقي نخبة من العقول من جميع أنحاء العالم في حدث يجمع بين أمجاد الماضي وتحديات الحاضر ورؤى المستقبل. أهلا بكم في أول نسخة من مؤتمر دبي الدولي للمكتبات، حيث تبدأ رحلة جديدة لإعادة تعريف دور المكتبات في العالم. أكثر من 60 خبيراً من 25 دولة يجتمعون ليطرحوا رؤى جديدة ستعيد تشكيل مفهوم المكتبات. استعدوا لاستكشاف التحول الرقمي في المكتبات عبر الذكاء الاصطناعي واكتشاف الكنوز الأيقونية والمجموعات النادرة. من خلال أكثر من 60 جلسة نلقي الضوء على مستقبل المكتبات وأهمية التراث والمعرفة للأجيال القادمة. إنه الحدث الذي سيخلد في تاريخ المكتبات، مؤتمر دبي الدولي للمكتبات 2024، حيث يجتمع الماضي والحاضر والمستقبل. دبي موئل الثقافات وحاضنة الإبداع، تحتضن بين أركانها مزيجا فريدا من الثقافات والتقاليد، حيث يلتقي التراث العريق مع الفكر الحديث. على مر العصور كانت دبي مركزا للحوار الحضاري وبيئة مثالية لتلاقي العقول والأفكار من مختلف أرجاء العالم، ساعية دوما لتعزيز ثقافة المعرفة والانفتاح. وهنا اليوم في قلب دبي حيث يبنى المستقبل، في هذا الصرح الثقافي مكتبة محمد بن راشد تلتقي نخبة من العقول من جميع أنحاء العالم في حدث يجمع بين أمجاد الماضي وتحديات الحاضر ورؤى المستقبل. أهلا بكم في أول نسخة من مؤتمر دبي الدولي للمكتبات، حيث تبدأ رحلة جديدة لإعادة تعريف دور المكتبات في العالم. أكثر من 60 خبيراً من 25 دولة يجتمعون ليطرحوا رؤى جديدة ستعيد تشكيل مفهوم المكتبات. استعدوا لاستكشاف التحول الرقمي في المكتبات عبر الذكاء الاصطناعي واكتشاف الكنوز الأيقونية والمجموعات النادرة. من خلال أكثر من 60 جلسة نلقي الضوء على مستقبل المكتبات وأهمية التراث والمعرفة للأجيال القادمة. إنه الحدث الذي سيخلد في تاريخ المكتبات، مؤتمر دبي الدولي للمكتبات 2024، حيث يجتمع الماضي والحاضر والمستقبل. دبي موئل الثقافات وحاضنة الإبداع، تحتضن بين أركانها مزيجا فريدا من الثقافات والتقاليد، حيث يلتقي التراث العريق مع الفكر الحديث. على مر العصور.
If everyone can be seated, and we'll get started with this afternoon panel. I wanted to thank everyone for attending this panel on libraries fit for space, and welcome our esteemed three panelists this afternoon who are sharing more about their spaces, and I think we'll have a really good discussion amongst their different spaces and perspectives and experiences. Please, let's start with you, Alicia.
Okay, sure. Hi, Good afternoon. I hope everyone had good lunch, and we will try not to be boring. If not, we'll all stand up and do exercises, all right? But I'm Alicia. I'm the director of the National Library of Singapore. It's my pleasure to be here today to tell you about a bit more of our spaces. So, oh wow, I'm amazed. The AV has already jumped in. So, I'm just sharing with you very quickly some of the things we've experimented with in the past last year or so. So the National Library Board of Singapore actually runs the National Library, the National Archives, as well as over 26 public libraries. So really, we have a lot of physical spaces to play with, and this is how we bring in new experiences to our libraries. Just on the top corner there, ooh, can I laser this thing? No, okay, maybe not. But if you see, there's a nice uncle and a child, and they're actually playing sports in the library. It's actually an Amazon Deep Racer and racing against the machine. So this is how we bring interesting new experiences to people who are not familiar with robotics and AI, and they just come into the library and say, oh wow, this is what's happening with the latest technology, and they can play with it in a very safe space. No one's going to judge them, so they love it. They love playing with this machine. They just come to the library every day to race. And at the same time, of course, learn about AI. And the next space at the okay, I didn't have a picture of this, but we worked with the Smithsonian institutions to bring in a tinkering space called Spark Lab for our 7 to 12-year-olds. So it's also increasingly recognizing that the library, we should recognize and be inclusive on the different types of learning that our kids go through. It's not just reading and the word and sitting there being lectured at, but test out, use all senses to learn, and this is a quite exciting space that our kids love. I mean, they just tear through the whole space. So I think we very quickly need to maintain it from the heavy use. Thirdly, in terms of heritage and culture of Singapore, what we tried to do was create new graphics. So if you imagine at the bottom corner here, we use one giant semicircle immersive sort of a wall that we created a 6 to 9 minute time-lapse video using entirely full of graphics that was painstakingly researched and created based off 50 maps and documents from our collection, our heritage collections, to get them to experience Singapore in 3 eras. Although we are a very young country of only maybe 59 years, but actually 700 years worth of history. But still, we try to make it relevant and relatable to our audiences, because Singapore is a very fast-changing nation. Just like look at Dubai in the past 10 years, so many new buildings. For us, it's even worse. We tear down our buildings and build. So at least here, I think we still can see some buildings. Whereas, yeah, I mean, I'm not that young, but even my early school is no longer where it used to be. So, yeah, things change too fast. So places and spaces like this is something our Singapore audience treasure. So when we bring them through these memories, they love it. They go through these graphic installations. They just sit there and experience it, both sound as well as image. And yeah, it's a great time for them to learn about your heritage and your history. And then last but not least, it's a picture of our senior minister here at the bottom. Our current prime minister has also visited this, and it's an installation that we just did, and it's chatting with a book. So we work with an author and got off the rights, as well as with the publisher, to say, look, we want to experiment with something. Would you like to do this with us? So basically, the author wrote 2 giant volumes about one of our pioneer leaders. It is just this thick. So 2 thick books, and said, look, we want to experiment with AI. So we worked with Amazon Web Services to create this, and the kids you just type in or chat with it verbally or yeah on the installation, just like what he's doing here, and they'll come up with the answer for you literally in 2-3 seconds. So you just ask, what are you about, and then they'll come and talk to you. You can ask all sorts of strange questions, and yet because we did vigorous testing, there is no hallucinations. The large language model is controlled. The information is only from these 2 giant books, as well as our government records, our oral histories from National Archives, and then from the National Library, our entire biographies and all our written articles that we own copyright to. So we actually ring-fence the whole thing, and after vigorous testing, our librarians were very cynical and saying, this is is it going to be ChatGPT? Is it going to tell me lies? But no, it worked really well. And surprisingly, guys, after doing this, the bookstores around our library sold out of the 2 volumes of the book. So we got people interested in reading those giant 2 tomes. So it's to say that, yeah, it's a very successful experiment. And now we're thinking, what else can we do? And to work with generative AI and control the tech, together with the tech giants, rather than let them control us and libraries. So this is just some examples of what we've been doing. So you don't need me to go through the rest yet, right? So yeah, we're okay. Yes. Trinity.
I'll go to that. There we go. There we go. Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted to be here. I'm Helen Shenton. I'm librarian and college archivist at Trinity College Dublin, where I've been for 10 years. And Trinity itself is a research intensive university that's over 400 years old. We're known for our 18th century old library, but then we have 6 20th century libraries, and we have 1 new 21st century library, plus we've got, I always think we've got digital libraries as well. We were reviewed recently, we had a master plan, it's a city centre campus. We have 2 million visitors come onto the campus, as well as all of our students and our researchers and visiting academics. And when we had a master plan done, one of the reviewers said, in their experience internationally, the part of a university that changes the most is a library. And so in our 20th century libraries, it used to be you would walk in and there were all microfilm or whatever. Now it's maker spaces and so on, but we can talk about all that. Just visually, I wanted to talk briefly about the Book of Kells experience. So as anyone who came to the plenary session knows, that the very famous old library we will close in about 18 months' time for a major refurbishment and conservation. So, yeah, it's okay. Yeah, I'm all right. And I'm just explaining what this is. For anyone who didn't come, is that when we're closed, we have 900,000 visitors, so we needed the equivalent experience for them. And we've done a completely digital, immersive, it's about the size of this area. And just to briefly explain, as you come in, so here's Samuel Beckett, it's all animated. Samuel Beckett, the Nobel Prize winner, that we've got all of his correspondence, that explains or introduces all of our collections to our visitors. It also explains why they're there and what's happening and why it's closed. Secondly, we have, I don't know if you know the long room, it's got a very distinctive series of sculptures, which when I started were all men. I'm the first woman since 1592 to be the librarian. And so on my watch, we're all women here. And so when also we have the first woman president since 1592. So we created the first women's sculptures. And as part of this display, there's a conversation between, say, Jonathan Swift, 2 men and 2 women. They're animated. This is the part that we've learnt that children like the best. They're known as the chatty busts. And there's a conversation going on. But the key point is that all the text and the context was, we developed it with a company, but all the intellectual content, I say that content is queen, all the intellectual content was, and the narrative came from our professors and our expert librarians. There's then an 8-minute completely immersive surround experience of the history of the Book of Kells, which it's its whole history since it was created, and then how it came from Iona and is visually explosive. And then we have an completely immersive long room, which then all tendrils and lots of it's the whole history of the Book of of the Long Room, but it also has these amazing graphics which are taken from the collections. And just to give you a flavour, that's it. So, thank you.
Helen, you are a tough act to follow, but I will do my best. I'm going to need you all to visualize. My name is Wanjiru Koinange. I am an author and a restorer of libraries from Nairobi, Kenya. And I'll speak to you a little bit about the work that we do at Book Bank. Book Bank, we work with existing libraries, we adopt them, and then we make them adaptable for the people that are using them. And our 3 projects are the Macmillan Memorial Library, which is Nairobi's oldest library and Kenya's second oldest library. It has 2 smaller branches in the eastern part of the city called Eastlands Library and Kaloleni Library. Now, the Macmillan Library was built in 1931 when Kenya was still a British colony. And it was built by Lady Lucy Macmillan in honor of her late husband. And when it was built in 1931, it was intended for the exclusive use of British settlers in Kenya. So my grandmother never used that library, nor did my grandfather or most Kenyans who were around at that time. In 1958, the use was transferred to the Nairobi City Council on condition that Kenyans could use the library, and that was granted. However, today, when you walk into the Macmillan, it still looks like it does in 1931. I'm talking about the collection, the furniture, the sculptures, the art, everything. So if you want to get a sense of Nairobi in 1931, you walk into Macmillan. And I'm sorry I don't have any slides, but if you look at bookbank.org, which is our website, you'll be able to see all 3 of these libraries. So when my co-founder and I set up Book Bank in 2017, we set it up for the Macmillan because we wanted 2 other women to now shape the future of this library. And we thought that we would get in there and bring it all down and now put Africa, let's put Kenya in the building. But that wasn't the case because we learned that that is not the way that you design for the future. You have to take the past, stare at it in all of its discomfort, and then balance it out with narratives that reflect the current users. And this was a big job. It still is. We haven't done it yet, and we're 7 years old. But what we did do is we discovered that we can't come from it was a big leap from where Macmillan was to what we wanted it to be, which is a palace for our people. So we went back to the other 2 libraries, which are much younger. Kaloleni was built in 1967. Eastlands in 1969. So they're much younger. They don't have any of the painful past that the Macmillan does, and they were already really, really well used. So we used those 2 libraries to begin to design the library of the future for Nairobi. And we spent 2 years asking users, why do you come here? There's no toilets, there's no electricity, there's barely a updated collection, but you're still coming every single day. Why? And they told us, we come because we need a quiet space. We come because the house we live in is too busy, so we come and do our homework here. And there were all of these reasons. And then we understood why they were coming. We asked them, okay, why would you come back? What can we do to make you come back, to make this space serve you better? And they told us, very simply, we want longer hours, we want Wi-Fi, we want toilets, basic toilets, we want perhaps some clean drinking water, more things to do. And over the course of the 2 years, we designed these 2 libraries, Kaloleni and Eastlands, into exactly what the community had told us they wanted. And now the usership of that space has gone up more than 200% in the last 2 years. So now we have a kind of blueprint for what it looks like to design a palace for the people. And we're currently applying all of that knowledge into the Macmillan, because with some of these spaces, it's not just about what they hold, but it's how you feel when you walk in. And that is something that you can't fake it, you can't rush it. You have to really tap into the soul of a space. And you do that through the programs, through the people, and through asking a lot of questions.
Thank you so much. For this kind of this introduction that was beautiful. I like the soul of the space. I'm really touched by this. So all of you have kind of presented some different, your different spaces, and you've already kind of touched on this, but you ask a lot of questions, but how do you start to address the needs of your community within these spaces, and how do you prioritize or make these tough decisions about what comes first, perhaps? Can I start with maybe you, Helen? And
Okay, thank you. So in the contemporary spaces, we've been working a lot with students with intellectual disabilities and students with sensory disabilities. There's an absolutely brilliant research unit which works on research with people with intellectual disabilities. And as the demographic changes of our students, and also as there's many more diagnoses of neurodiversity and whatever, so we are creating different sorts of spaces in the contemporary libraries. So some of them are much quieter, for people who are upset by noise, basically. One of my colleagues in University College Dublin, which is one of the other universities, has now introduced spaces where you can change the light, so very soft colours. And then we're also working a lot with students with intellectual disabilities about what works for them. So, for example, we had a series of students, we asked them. My colleagues then worked with this group of students, and they made a film about what it was like to come into the library. And it turned out things like, as you went through the reader gates, if you came out, having not checked out a book, all the sirens go off, there's a noise. If that happened for this group of students with intellectual disabilities, it was so unnerving, they would never come into the library again. So we did a film where it was of the students themselves teaching each other how to navigate. It wasn't us doing it unto them.
absolutely.
And then we had an Oscar night, and their parents came in. But there were such basic things that in my ignorance, in our ignorance, we just didn't know.
Yeah.
So we're working with much more, with all the different groupings of our students.
Yeah. No, it's phenomenal, and obviously, having your design built directly from your community and in response to their needs. Alicia, yeah.
Sure. Since we're talking about persons with disabilities, similarly in Singapore, we opened early last year, a public library that has completely been designed with persons with disabilities in mind. So before that, I think at least half a year or 1 year before that, we consulted heavily. So, if you guys are familiar with design thinking process, a lot of it is human design and interviewing all sorts of people and their lifestyles to get an understanding. So, and we ended up deciding, we need a permanent advisory committee on this. So now we have a permanent advisory committee just to talk through persons with all sorts of disabilities, caregivers, more importantly, and what are their needs to even bring you and get you to come to the library in the first place. With all that in mind, we changed our membership policies. We changed the way that we design the library. Those with persons with autism, on the autistic spectrum, they said, we need calm pods. So, okay, we built you a calm pod. Mothers said, I need a place where I can nurse my child. I need a place that if they have a meltdown, I can put them there and they can eat their favorite snacks without worrying about littering the library. So it's all this kind of spaces that are near to them without them having to feel uncomfortable and having to run out of the library if they have a screaming child. So things like that. It's heavily having to work closely with our communities, I think, to design those spaces. And speaking of which, I think we also want to talk about digital, right? So how do we also design our digital platforms? So the National Library does have a mobile app, and they were asking us, look, I just want simple things like, can I book my seat through your app? Do I have to go to your website? So things like that. We're just taking the feedback, and every single feedback, every time we upgrade our mobile app, these are the things that we think about and test out new services with,
Absolutely make it easier for your communities to access and, So you had mentioned as well how you've consulted heavily with the community in bringing this along and how it's something that does take a period of time. How did you decide, I guess, what to prioritize when working on this massive project that I know is still, right?
It's ongoing.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's about what we can find first. So if you have funding to run an arts program, you'll start with that.
Yeah.
But most times it's really, if somebody tells us, for instance, when we gathered all this information about what people wanted and we had the money to rebuild the spaces, we went back to the community and said, okay, now would you come and we'll hire you to rebuild the spaces. So the people who use the libraries as children, whose children were now using the spaces, came back to reconstruct the spaces. And then once that was done, and often in Kenya, you will not find a contractor who will agree to recruit from the community. They want to come with their staff, and they want to come with their formally trained people. And that was the number one criteria for us, that if you're going to work on these libraries, if you're going to take this money of ours, you're going to have to recruit from the communities. And the only people to say yes are who we went with for the work. Then once the buildings were done, we went back to the same group of people and said, okay, now we need janitors, we need security people, we need minders, we need volunteers. Can you come and do that? And what has happened is that we never really have to think hard about what people need, because we have the community members here every day working for us. They're on the WhatsApp groups in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
So when the issue of, say, currently right now our biggest need is civic education, because we had a lot of protests around the cost of living in Kenya.
Yeah.
And then from the discussions in the WhatsApp group that our staff members are on, they could be like, I think we need to inform people about why the finance bill is what it's going to do for them.
Yeah.
And so we're always consistently, we're not making anything up. We really place people where we can get the kind of information that we need. And then we go to our communities, because we've learned that our beneficiaries, the people who use the libraries, and our digital audiences are different. So then we'll go to our digital audiences and say, hey, we need lawyers and other people who can come and teach our communities about how they vote and why the finance bill affects them and how it affects them. And people will volunteer 2 hours of their time, come sit there and do a one-on-one session. And if you have enough lawyers in the room to do it, then you've solved a massive problem. One final example I can give you is, before we did any reconstruction work, we wanted to bring people in so we could ask them questions. So we started having programs. We just bring musicians in. I'm like, play a gig, let's show a film screening, let's just do whatever we can to bring people in. And we noticed that children would come in, and they'd come in at 9 a.m. when we open, but then at around 11, they'd go home and not come back. And we're like, where are we losing these kids?
Yeah.
Where is there no retention? Because they were hungry. So they were going home for lunch and not coming back. So we went back to our community and we're like, hey, we need caterers, we need food, food.
Yeah.
And we began feeding the kids, and retention was, now we don't have enough space for our programs. And it's just those small things. Sometimes you just have to listen, pay attention, and all of that. And you prioritize them just based on what resources you have, either financial or people.
Yeah. I appreciate this grassroots aspect. I think that kind of has evolved out of what you're talking about, and really having this community involvement. And like you said too, not just paying attention to the data that you've collected, but those observations that children they're going home to eat, for example, they're hungry. There's this, I think that's a beautiful attention to detail and involvement of the community in so many different mechanisms, ways. Thank you so much, Jerry. And this is definitely, I think, building off of this is how do we attract youth and kind of new users to our spaces and our initiatives? And I believe Alicia had a really interesting
share. Sorry, could you bring back my slides again? Yeah, we're hopping all over the place. But yeah, I just needed a context slide. Sorry, can you bring up my slides again? But I'll just talk it through. So basically, I had a nice discussion with the CEO of our National Youth Council, and this is what he told me. In terms, I say, you need to tell me, you work with youth every day. Yes, I do have youth in the libraries, but it's not the same as you, where you talk about their aspirations, their dreams, and then how do we translate that to a library service and programs. So early on, I talked about the experiences you can get in our Singapore libraries. Yes, it takes money. I'm not going to joke with you. It does cost. But when it comes to serving the next generation, it's also about how we design our products. So I think on the left side, there's lots of literature out there you can read about what the youth are like and how this is what they're seeking for. And I think these are actually issues that we should help the youth address. And so on the right side, after talking to the CEO, he shared with me, these are some strategies you can use to appeal to your youth. I think for Singapore's youth, they're very plugged in, and if you don't have a digital presence, whether it's social media, Instagram, TikTok, Vine, whatever they use, Discord, you've got to be on Discord, guys. And they're constantly searching and discovering things for themselves and forming their own views of you as a library. So you've got to keep your content online, like spot on, and just actually what we did was just hire youth to create content, because create content for yourselves. So that's one way, wayfinding, we call it. Help them to find you, and then also synergizing, because our youth, just like I was sharing, they're very busy. If you think adults are busy, our youth are even busier. They're in school, they've got so many things going on, they've got so many things available to them these days that it's information overload. So they're like, I'm not going to make a decision for 1 week later, I'll just make my decision now. If I suddenly finish my homework earlier, I have 1 hour, what can I do with it? And they just do it in time and try to kill many things with one stone. So in that sense, how we design our programs and services, when we design these things, keep them in mind, where they just want to do many things and experience many things before even coming into your library. And I think really they keep asking for white space, which just means a chill out, unstructured space. It's good for their psychology, but I think for us at libraries, it's a bit tough to tell our funders they just build me a space that has nothing in it. So that took a while, but we tried that actually in that new library I mentioned in Singapore. Last year we opened. So it's a teen space, and literally we don't do anything with it. We just throw a few bean bags there, and they love it. And so we're like, okay, I think it's working. Don't come and ask us to say what are your KPIs, key performance indicators for that space, but it just says it's working for the youth. They need it. Let's keep having that youth space that has nothing in it. Because youth are very tied to, they're very concerned about the world and their issues, right? So this is why we designed this program. So I'm just sharing you some new program that we've come up with. It's called Catalyst. It's what we're trying to facilitate in terms of the library as a connector, both definitely, we're plugged into government, we're plugged into industry, we're also plugged in with non-profit organizations. So why don't we just be the space, that safe space that all three of you just come together and we discuss it, and we'll include the public as well as youth who are interested in making a change to the world that we live in. So for us in Singapore, the latest one now, of course, is dealing with AI and what's going to do to us, disruptive. And we actually have a non-profit agency called AI for Good, and these are volunteers. They're just very, very eager to make sure that AI, does its place. And the public doesn't know it. Students and youth don't know it. So let's just bring everybody together. And we've designed this program that it's not just a one-off unconference kind of thing, but it's like across 3 months. We're basically nurturing a learning community there and then. So we're starting this in January next year. So I'll let you know in 6 months whether it was success. Yeah. But we've got lots of partners. I'm sorry, it's all written at the bottom, but they're the tech giants, Google, the AI for Good, our ministry that's in charge of AI, and the Singapore University of Technology and Design are key ones to organize this because they know about AI. They're the ones creating things as we speak. And together, all 3 or 4 different types of partners, we're coming together so that the youth can critically engage with these issues and form action communities and actually influence the partners that we're talking about, and don't feel like, that's just so foreign to us. So we're trying this. We'll see if it works. But it's just one way in which we can engage youth better on the issues that are important to them. Yeah.
This is an amazing way, I think, to bring together facets of the nation as well as different communities within the library. This is really, that library is as a space for communities. This is a really great example of this. Helen, can you share a little bit about
your communities.
Thank you. So we've got about 22,500 students, plus then also the postgrads, and then visiting scholars and our own researchers. And what we found is that the need for, well, we've got 3,500 spaces, and they're full. A colleague of mine says students are like water. They were sitting on chairs even before we'd unwrapped them. You know, they're fantastic. But some key things came out from the pandemic. The first was the first building to reopen after the pandemic was the library. Yeah. And a professor wrote to me and said, when the library's open, the university is open. Yeah. Then, that day that we opened, we just opened for postgrads. And someone wrote to me at the end of that day and said, I got more work done in 3 hours than the last 3 months. Yeah. The conditions that people were living in, the isolation. We then had a pandemic of mental health. And our director of health services said that they were doing online consultations with students who were completely isolated, going to bed at 3 o'clock, sending out for food, saw no one, wouldn't even have eye contact over Zoom. And the counsellors were saying, go into the library, because at least you have to have some contact with people. So I ran out into the front of the library and said, do you see these? Yes, we see them. Go and talk to them. And since then, I've actually thought about the library in terms of it being a non-medical support. Yeah. So people want a safe space. They want a comfortable space. They want, in Ireland, they want it warm. Here, you want it cold.
But not too cold.
Not too cold. You want good Wi-Fi. You want to hang out with your friends. A lot of people don't use books. When I was at Harvard, the Harvard Law School library was packed. No one, they'd all got the laptops. No one was using the books. I read recently that, well, we've just done a survey of all of our undergrads. They like working around books, even if they're not using them. Increasingly, collaboration. So one fourth-year biochemist student said to me, I have done nothing by myself in my 4 years. So that's both in the lab and in the library. So that we want collaborative space for 2s to 3s to 4s to 5s. And if you go to the Hunt Library, North Carolina, which I would say is absolutely, it's been open 10 years now, and they, a staggering amount of collaborative space, and they're finding that is used the most of all. And so how we're using the libraries is changed, but they're still absolutely critical. And a final point on the social level is that there's a housing crisis in Ireland, particularly in Dublin. So we either have students who are commuting huge distances, or frankly, we suspect that a couple of them are actually living in the 24-hour postgraduate library. So people are spending longer on campus, and they want conducive spaces. And the final point about 24-hour libraries, which we have gone to, then there is a concern about people's welfare. Should we be encouraging people to work 24 hours?
Sure. Thanks. Yeah, absolutely. So many things to pull up from this. I'm trying to decide which angle to go. I really appreciate, obviously, that you've addressed mental health, and during the pandemic and also post-pandemic, I think what all of our institutions and organizations have encountered. I know earlier Alicia also had mentioned white space in the library. Kind of wondering what this looks like in your context and how you're responding to these needs as well, because Helen just brought up also library hours and the hours that things are needed and how and what we can accommodate for a variety of reasons in our spaces.
For those of you who might have been here in the session before lunch, I mentioned our controversial use of Wi-Fi to draw people in, because it was one of the things that was top on the list that people told us they wanted. Yeah. So Kenya is very well connected in terms of like Wi-Fi and internet access, but it's still quite expensive, especially for those in underserved communities where we work. So when we had brand new buildings in 2021, we got some high-speed internet, and then everybody came. And they were coming for the high-speed internet, and that's completely true and fair. But then what we started doing is switching off the Wi-Fi at 4 p.m. so that people could do other things, like go play a game, go to the cafe, go do something else, get off your screen, get off your desk, and do something else. And we became so unpopular. If you go to Google today and look at our reviews, they're not good. They're like, the staff are so noisy. I'm like, yes, because we don't sort of operate quiet libraries. We have spaces that are quiet, but anywhere you can have a conference like this one and a discussion like this one, and really encourage people to do more than just use their Wi-Fi. So the things we do to bring people in, our dance program is one of those. You can come and take dance classes at 11 a.m., 3 p.m. every day at the library, and we have a room with mirrors for that. So those things draw people in. Once they're inside, then you create other things they can do. So our spaces are very beautiful. We are over the top with our beauty because we believe that if you're in beautiful spaces, you also want to act beautifully. You want to be better. You want to do better.
Yeah,
so everywhere you sit in the East End and Kaloleni Library, you'll either see something green or something beautiful, a piece of art. And that's intentional across the board. And then there's also things we do in Macmillan, which we haven't restored yet. We're still fundraising for it. And this one is in the city center. And there we have an annual gala that is becoming the most glamorous event in Nairobi. And we dress it up. We have a strict dress code. We charge as much as we can. And we only have 100 people come. Because it's not just about having your beneficiaries come in. Inclusivity means you're getting everybody.
Yeah.
The rich people come to pay for the programs, but we also want to kind of begin to encourage this the what is the word I'm looking for, the glamour and the
Prestige?
the prestige around libraries, right? Because libraries used to be such prestigious. We used to be proud to go to the library, and now this whole thing for please come, please read. I'm like, no, let's make them want to come into the library. So we really break up our programs into what brings people in and what keeps people in.
That's really beautiful. Thank you. I'm just thinking about, I don't know, like these gala events in your library, and attracting all aspects of your community is really
And
beautiful.
we also have the stairs, so we really think we're the Met
wow.
Gala, honestly, because we dress up
course.
with stairs
I
and we
love
have the
this.
lions and everything, and we're like, we're Nairobi's Met Gala, and we're gonna just fake it till we make it.
That is brilliant. I love that. And I'm going to be looking up pictures of this as well. Absolutely. I'm impressed. So I know that they were probably warning me about time earlier, and I probably ignored it. So I'm going to open this up for questions, and they'll probably let me know how many minutes we have left for those. But yeah, if we can start with right over here. Okay.
Thank you. Very interesting presentation on different types of libraries. My question actually will be based on my previous experience. Once I was in Edmonton Public Library, and I know there are different community groups asking for spaces. And sometimes this can be a religious group, sometimes kind of opponent, kind of really weird groups that library either need to accommodate or say no. What will be your policies to say no to some groups or to put some kind of borderlines for the use of library spaces?
I can start. So we're fully inclusive. So we allow anybody in, but the kind of boundaries we keep is around programming. So we don't do any religious programming or any political programming, because it can get very, very divisive. So, and there's a world of topics outside of those two that you can, and because there's so many other spaces for politics and religious engagement, so we keep that out of the library. Outside of that, everybody and anybody is welcome, as long as you're not causing harm. So of course there are things that if you're coming in intoxicated, we will not let you in, or we'll let you in and put you in a corner and hydrate you until you behave yourself. And then you can interact with, with the library users. But outside of that, we really try and encourage everybody to come.
So the university, our primary objective has to be for our undergrads and whatever. But we, several things. Firstly, we work very closely with what's called the Trinity Long Room Hub, which is the Advanced Arts and Humanities Institute, which has got a public remit. And so we put on a lot of events in consultation, things like behind the headlines. So whatever the political issues of the day, we'll get people in and that sort of thing. I come from a national institutional background, Victoria and Albert Museum, National Library, my instinct is to open everything out, but we can't because of licensing, apart from anything, just practicalities of licensing. Our first 21st century library, which is going to be on a new campus. Why we then started, this is in where all the tech giants are, the European headquarters of the tech giants, and also where the innovation center is, where the innovation sector is. The idea is to have that much more open, ideally without gates, to open it out to the community. There'll be an exhibition space where I'm hoping to have, to be able to showcase all the digital humanities projects, because you walk into the campus of Trinity and you never see any of our amazing research. Where is it? So particularly the digital humanities, the output is very, very visual. And so that's how we're going to address it. Thanks.
Nothing further to add. I mean, it's true. It has to be like your policy, whether it's for national security or national interests. There's also considering like, do you ask them to pay? Is it a venue sponsorship or is it a venue for hire? So all these come into account, and most of the time, I think it's because at the National Library here in Singapore, our spaces are just fully booked half the time for book launches. So we don't even have, we'll just honestly tell you, oh, sorry, that date is unavailable, so we can avoid the whole, oh, what weird group are you from? So, yeah.
Do we have another question in the? Yep. Yeah. Eleni?
I'm Eleni, I'm a school librarian working in Abu Dhabi. I want to ask, do you have requests for taking library experiences outside the doors of the library, like learning streets, for example, like taking books creating library stations outside the library and extend these library spaces outside? That's my question.
Extending library spaces outside of our current spaces. Oh yes, we do that all the time in Singapore. Okay, Singaporeans love to shop, so they're always in the shopping malls like the Dubai Mall here. So we do pop-ups. So we did a pop-up installation of a comics library in a very popular shopping mall, and all the books got, So families were coming in on weekends. Instead of going to the nearest library, they went to the shopping mall, did their grocery shopping, and picked up books. So we do this on a regular basis. We work with property developers, the shopping mall owners, to say, oh, what white space do you have that's in between leasing? And then they're very happy that with us, we actually bring in more traffic. So we, in some places though, some of our libraries, we have a permanent space in shopping malls because they see us as a core tenant. We bring in people just like groceries. But that said, even in the airplane as well, we put in content in our local Singapore Airlines carrier, so you can watch videos that's based off our heritage collections. We call it From Book to Cook. So we brought out all the old cookery books and got them cooking, and there's like a cooking show, but it's actually from the library. So there are just different ways in which you can reach your different audiences. And vice versa as well. Our museums are very jealous of our reach. So they have started putting in heritage exhibitions inside our public libraries. So it can go both ways, triple ways. I think I really encourage you to always think outside of the box of how do you reach your customers, your audiences. For us, especially for the special education schools, they may not, they're not comfortable with the caregivers to even enter our library. So we have a bus library, and we go to that special education school. It's a special timing. They get used to this where they say, oh, every Monday afternoon the bus is coming. I get to read books with my parent or my teacher. And it's a safe space. They don't have to worry about how they behave. You have a meltdown, just leave the bus. So in that sense, we work in different ways to reach our different audiences.
I can just add a little bit. When the pandemic hit, and we actually picked that time to go into construction mode because we had tax breaks, it was cheaper. So we're like, this is the best time to do the construction. But the libraries were closed at the time when people needed them the most. So what we did is we had small collections and we took them to people's homes, which involved us walking around our community and getting to know where there were children, how many, so we can actually put packs together and distribute them. So we did that during the pandemic. It was a lot more work than we thought. So we've never done it again. And thankfully now we can draw people in. And we're like, just come, the books are here. Just come and get them here. But also, for the last, Bookbank is about 7 years old now, and we still think we're in startup mode because the vision we have for libraries is big. We think that the model we're creating can go anywhere. As long as there's a social problem that needs to be solved, this model can solve it. But for the last 7 years, people would ask us, oh, come to Ghana and do what you're doing. Come to Rwanda, come. And we're like, we're not ready. Just give us a few minutes. Now I think we're 90% of the way there because we think that we're really creating a model for the renaissance of libraries. Because if you center the people, which is always a thing that we do, center the people, the users, then everything else makes sense. Because if you put that one of our libraries here, we wouldn't do the same things we do in Nairobi. We would learn our community and their issues, and then design a library to solve those issues. And we all know that every space in the world needs a kind of social hub. So that's the way we're thinking about expanding. If we could group our product into sub-products, then what does the UAE need? What does Ghana need? Let's go do that there. Then you really begin to build more robust spaces.
Being able to roll it out then to different communities and customize it.
So just a couple of things. Firstly, our big red box, as it is, big red box as it's known, that was designed, it's actually 4 separate rooms and all the technology is completely independent with a view to, in time, that can go anywhere. I get asked, why haven't we got the Book of Kells at Dublin Airport like the Rice Museum is at Schiphol Airport? So actually it can go on a USB stick and you can have you could have it here. And you simply then create the space. So that's one way that it's going out. And the second is we are increasingly doing exhibitions, again, when we're closed, of our material going out. So there's one that's on the cooler press. But that little exhibition, we've made a physical exhibition. Yeah. And we always make a digital exhibition, so they all live on. Yeah. But we work then with the Department of Foreign Affairs, and there are 85 consulates and embassies around the world. And a capsule version of that, it's all about the Cooler Press, which was a private press that was founded by the 2 Yates sisters. And that is going into embassies and consulates around the world, augmented by local material.
That's phenomenal. I love to see this customization to these different communities, and also the fact that you're able to kind of move these spaces and then also bring it to your users and what they need most and what's most relevant to them as well. So I really have to, I think, end it here because I believe we have gone over time a bit. I've been a naughty moderator, so my apologies for that.
I'm sorry for the one person who wanted to ask.
But perhaps, afterwards you're able to ask some of our panelists. So I'd just like to have a big thank you for everyone for joining us at the Dubai International Library Conference. I'd really like to thank our fabulous panelists, the teams at the Mohammed bin Rashid Library, the Emirates Literature Foundation, and the Index for organizing the conference, AV team, volunteers, the media team, and of course, again, our panelists and all of you for being present with us today. Thank you so much, everyone. That was really fabulous.
الإبداع تحتضن بين أركانها مزيجا فريدا من الثقافات والتقاليد، حيث يلتقي التراث العريق مع الفكر الحديث. على مر العصور كانت دبي مركزا للحوار الحضاري وبيئة مثالية لتلاقي العقول والأفكار من مختلف أرجاء العالم، ساعية دوما لتعزيز ثقافة المعرفة والانفتاح. وهنا اليوم في قلب دبي حيث يبنى المستقبل. في هذا الصرح الثقافي مكتبة محمد بن راشد تلتقي نخبة من العقول من جميع أنحاء العالم في حدث يجمع بين أمجاد الماضي وتحديات الحاضر ورؤى المستقبل. أهلا بكم في أول نسخة من مؤتمر دبي الدولي للمكتبات، حيث تبدأ رحلة جديدة لإعادة تعريف دور المكتبات في العالم. أكثر من 60 خبيراً من 25 دولة يجتمعون ليطرحوا رؤى جديدة ستعيد تشكيل مفهوم المكتبات. استعدوا لاستكشاف التحول الرقمي في المكتبات عبر الذكاء الاصطناعي واكتشاف الكنوز الأيقونية والمجموعات النادرة. من خلال أكثر من 60 جلسة نلقي الضوء على مستقبل المكتبات وأهمية التراث والمعرفة للأجيال القادمة. إنه الحدث الذي سيخلد في تاريخ المكتبات، مؤتمر دبي الدولي للمكتبات 2024، حيث يجتمع الماضي والحاضر والمستقبل. دبي موئل الثقافات وحاضنة الإبداع، تحتضن بين أركانها مزيجا فريدا من الثقافات والتقاليد، حيث يلتقي التراث العريق